Thank you for joining us on Impolite Company, where we discuss religion, politics, and their intersections. I'm here joined by Thor Harter.
Hey, how's it going?
And I'm Cameron Jones. And we're answering a question today, or at least investigating. We were discussing in class a couple weeks ago, what do we look at whenever we decide the law? I tried to understand the law of a certain culture, of a certain society.
Yeah.
And we certainly agreed that religion was a big part of that. In some cases more than others. I think that you said something to the lines of...
Somebody had mentioned, like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I had...
We were talking about Islam.
And I said that, like, it was one of the more inherently political religions.
And I think that I would agree that it is as political as a religion can get. So I do agree with that. And my contention at the moment was, but it's not like the only one that's there, you know?
No.
And that's not necessarily what you're saying, but
of course,
that's where we decided we had an interesting conversation.
You also have to remain on your guard when people say that, because I could be coming at that from like it's an accusatory stance.
There could be Islamophobia in it.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That's the thing is there's a big difference between critical thinking in religion and being, you know... there's a talk of Christianity has a conversation about we're being persecuted. You know, there is persecution. There is also real critical conversation about it, and that's what we're trying to do today. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, I don't think that you're coming from any Islamophobia, but it's true that some religions, and Islam is a great example, are deeply ingrained in their governments and in the legislation. One thing that we talked about was that obviously religions are going to affect your politics, so they're kind of inherently political in that they inform your values.
By and large, like anything that has like a moral structure is going to inform. People want to inject morality into, as they should, into, or like at least their conception of like ethics into their law. So obviously, anything that has a moral or ethical code is going to color that.
Yeah. If I think that, you know, life is the main thing, that's all about giving babies a chance to be born, then I can use my religion to vote against abortion, for example. So in that case, all religions are political.
Yes,
right?
yeah. So there's a base, like a background radiation that all of them have.
But what we're going to hone in on in the next half hour or so is really how do these religions identify politically? I mean, are they really a religion at all, or are they a political hierarchy? This is the more contentious argument that I think our professor brought up, is that, you know, they're not, it's not religious political as... We're not being very religious political people. We're being very political religious people.
Yeah.
We were kind of discussing that earlier.
Yeah, and exactly. And also another like sort of baseline like politics that a lot of religions have is anything with a hierarchy is going to have an internal politics, and anything with a hierarchy is usually like, again, like with a hierarchy. Well, I don't know. Again, I didn't say this already, but like there is a concentration of power that comes from a hierarchy. Obviously, people ceding power up the chain of command all the way up to, like, say, the top. Use Christianity or use Catholicism, the Pope.
Well, so what we're talking about now is that there is government within a religion too.
Yes,
right.
Yes, and that imparts there is a lot of political power in that. You know, I mean, like everyone uses like the term office politics. So we don't we can understand that politics isn't just something that occurs just within like the voting booth or whatever.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things that I like to do is just take a look at the 5 major religions, and we'll try and, you know, give them individual rankings on how political they are, and we'll discuss why we think that is. The first religion is obviously Christianity. This is the dominant religion in the world today, and I think that, you know, it obviously tells people exactly how, maybe not exactly. Look, there's examples of kings and judges all throughout the Bible. David, Solomon. I would argue that that's politics within religiosity. You know, the religion directly is saying, hey, there should be a good king, and you should pay attention to the king. Give him.
God literally ordained those kings too.
Yeah,
like according to the story.
And so that religion actually says that politics are a reflection of God's will.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, like, obviously, it makes it, like, again, since God ordains kings like David, like Solomon, and since he intercedes especially with them, like, other than, like, with his own, like, son and some of his, like, chosen prophets, the only people that God really talks to in the Bibles is his chosen few that he chose to, like, lead his nation, which according to those books is Israel.
Yeah.
Not the Israel we know today. I mean, well, that's a different conversation.
That's a whole
for a
other
different
one there.
Yeah, that's an entirely different
But
conversation.
that's okay.
For a different
We'll
story.
segue a little bit into Judaism for a minute.
Sure.
Judaism is a book of laws. Christianity has laws, but it also has, stories, and then it has a historical sort of part to it. We're talking about what Jesus was doing as opposed to what we're supposed to do. The Old Testament has a lot of what you're supposed to do. So the Torah is really a book of law. I mean, that's what is considered in their culture.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the foundations of, like, the first half of, like, the Christian Bible is like Jewish scripture.
Yeah,
so.
the Torah is the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So, what do we think about the political ramifications of being Jewish?
Well, so I actually in Judaism, like, there are strains of, like, Judaism that that are focused around intent. Like, there is an ethics centered around intentionally making the world better than you leave it. That is that's actually somewhat different than the way, like, Christians conceive of, like, acts of justice or mercy, whereas, because, like, in Christianity it can be very individualistic in the sense that, like, the things that you do for others is a self-cleansing act, whereas, like, in Judaism there can be, like, there are certain strains of Judaism that are about cleansing the world through your acts, and that's a subtle but distinct difference, right? The intent there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about the religion. Some religions tell you not, some certain sects of Christianity tell you not to be political, not to vote, or not to worry about these worldly things.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's true that Judaism mostly sees this world as being, at least in relation to Christianity, this world is more important. My Christian upbringing kind of is that don't worry about this world; it's all going to be thrown away and made better.
Yeah.
But
this might even be it.
The Jewish idea is that this might be it. Maybe, at least it's more prominent in that religion. So that kind of implies, although I don't know that this is always, I don't know that we have facts for this, but this implies that Judaism is more politically active.
Yeah, and to, like, circle around to, like, something that you said. Well, I mean, to, like, bridge two things that we talked about earlier is that, like, the beginnings of the Christian Bible is the Torah, and then there is the New Testament, and, like, I think the thing that makes defines Christianity isn't necessarily just its Jewish roots, but rather what they decided to add on to it or how they decided to amend it. So you really look at, like, the New Testament, and it really seems like as though the teachings of Jesus of Arimathea is to throw all of this political consideration away. You know what I mean? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, all of this sort of stuff. You are going to ascend, and all of this is going to fall apart.
I think that I would agree with you that what I would refer to as the historical Jesus and his philosophy, this so-called early Christianity, I do believe that that's what it was about, that it was about throwing away hierarchy, about no longer seeing differentiation between Gentile and Jew. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's necessarily what Christianity in the medieval ages and afterwards represents. And that's why we can say that early Christianity, perhaps, it's almost apolitical.
Yeah. I mean, because you could make the argument that, like, what Jesus was doing was political because it sounds a lot like anarchism. But I would say that because his conception of, like, throwing everything away, that this whole world will fall apart, is not that he wants to, like, it's not an ethic of deconstructing the hierarchies of now, but rather the hierarchies will fall away in a different space. So that is different than wanting to change what is here, and rather preparing yourself or your body or whatever for what is to come.
What this makes me think of is the spiritual plane. You know, we're talking about the actions that we're doing for this, and then the actions that we're doing for the meta to this, you know?
Yeah.
And it sounds like we're building a framework of saying that the more political ones are the ones that are more focused on this.
I think that might be true. I mean, I have,
and I'm sure that we'll be able to refute it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, my politics sort of center around I wouldn't call myself a Marxist, but I follow in the tradition of like the materialists. I like in believing that like the analysis of things that are historical or political can be analyzed through the lens of like material things.
And that's why you're an economist.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I study economics. So I think that would follow right in line with what my politics
it's almost like saying
are.
The early Christianity is not worried about the material, therefore it's more almost apolitical. Yeah, it's apolitical almost because of that, and therefore religions where like Judaism, where here and now this is the sacred. Those are, you have a higher chance of being politically active. Like, no, this is how God is supposed to be. That being said, the versions of Christianity that are out today are much more like that, in that they're worried about bringing the new era. You know, they want to bring revelation.
Yes, they think that there's an unlocking code, like that you like a keypad that you need to press in the right order to unlock perdition.
Now, this is where I get very confused, okay? Because I'm very interested in early Christianity, and what we just said was that it was amaterial and therefore a little bit apolitical. But what I believe that the historical Jesus was doing, I believe that the dude thought he was what was called an apocryphal Jew, which means they believed in the coming of the new era now, today, that the kingdom of heaven was going to land on earth, and that Jews and the good people were going to be exalted. He was going to be the king. That's what I think he believed. So what he was doing spiritually and politically could not be divorced.
Sure.
So his actual action was deeply political, whether or not our spiritual version of him in early Christianity was very political. He was.
And this is where my knowledge might fade away, because obviously there are a lot of books, and this is something that's like inherently political about like the structure of Christianity, which is how they construct their Bible, because there are plenty of gospels that exist that were edited out.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the extracurricular stuff there.
Yeah,
the so-called
but I've never
non-canonical Bibles. I've read a few of them, and more importantly, I've read from the people who have read them. And the truth is that some of them have more legitimacy than some of the books in the Bible, or at least were as important to early Christians as these other books were.
Yeah, there was very much a consolidation like system. It was kind of like you could almost think of like Christianity as like the there's like a theory in evolution that like sometimes evolution doesn't happen in small like incremental changes, but rather in huge spurts of random diversity that like come out of just like single or like two generations, and then the sort of Rube Goldberg-esque style of nature weeds all of the ineffectual ones out.
What I can say about that is that there isn't a Christianity. There are Christianities. There were then and there are now. And that's what you're talking about. There was probably more diversity of Christianity at that time
than there is now,
than there was after the first few hundred years, whenever there was a consolidation.
Yeah.
So we've taken a look at some Christianity and some Judaism, which I'm sure where we're the most comfortable in. Unfortunately, we're going to have to look at some of the Eastern religions. And I say unfortunately because as much as I'm very interested in Hinduism and Buddhism, I can't say that I can totally analyze them as well as I can analyze these Western Abrahamic religions.
Yeah, I mean, like you'll definitely get little flashes from me about those. I mean, like we'll just dig in and we'll
So
see
let's
where
start
we get.
with Hinduism.
Yeah, okay.
Hinduism is a broad, diverse group of religions put in together, like a cultural grouping of religions, and
Sure.
and there's Brahmins, Shivites, Vaishnavites, and so on. There's many breakdowns of it, and they're probably more diverse than Christianity, but they're all considered Hinduism. But all of them look to the Puranas and the Bhagavad Gita. They all have some of the same scriptural backgrounds, and in those scriptures, it's clear that there is a caste system.
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
that is spiritually and obviously politically binding, that you should play the role of a priest, a king, a worker, or a untouchable.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
that's what they say.
Yeah, and like there's like I mean, like depending on how they like which sect and views on reincarnation. I mean, like obviously,
in all
like
Hinduism believes in reincarnation.
yeah, you created the in your past life
The world that you're in now.
yes, exactly.
Your incarnation. Yeah.
Yes,
That's true.
Yeah. So like not only are you there by the domino sort of following like from just the mechanics of reincarnation, but you're also there by your own actions.
Yeah.
So there's like a two-tier you deserve where your place.
So this meta system, I always get in trouble with whenever I bring it up when I'm discussing, what someone deserves. For example, we're talking about government, we're talking politics, and we're talking about what people, how they should be treated. Are they equal or are they separate? What do they deserve? And we're using a system which says that that's based off of past lives. That's no longer, as we in the West we want an evidence base. Like, no, he deserves this because he did this.
Yeah.
And whenever you say that baby deserves to die because that's what their reincarnation says, that seems cold and definitely would be cold to think of it just like that. Oh, that's karma. So just what I want to say there is that we're looking at Christianity saying, oh, it's almost apolitical because it's worried about the next. And Judaism is almost very political because it's worried about now. Hinduism is worried about the next, and it's very political.
And it's also, well, I mean, I guess part of that is because like now is the next of like of yesterday.
What a circular argument we're having here.
Yeah, so it's a continuum. It's a closed system.
And so I would say that our framework that I was trying to build earlier just not holding up.
Not so
politics,
much.
Yeah,
It's
more complicated.
It's an imperfect heuristic.
Yeah, it's more nuanced than that. But we'll keep looking for frameworks that work.
Yeah.
And if we don't find one, that's perfectly fine. That's philosophy. I think that's a fun exercise.
Sure.
Buddhism is, in my mind, and this may be politically incorrect, it's actually it's Hindu heresy. He was a Hindu. The Buddha was a Hindu, and he's basically a Hindu who got Hinduism to the point that it was like, just follow me because I figured out Hinduism the way. So what do we think about the politics of Buddhism? How political is Buddhism?
Well, I think it's difficult to say because like on some level the strictures of Buddhism on paper are supposed to be like this let go of your earthly tether and sort of that's how you ascend. So there is a similar ethos to like
To
what
the
we
early
discussed
Christianity
about Jesus, about like letting
immaterial.
it go of the now because there's something else. And that's what what your soul yearns for, or whatever. But there's an issue of the fact that it's one of those things that creates its own hierarchy. Like Christianity didn't have doesn't have like a
The Bible doesn't say and you shall have a
anything.
pope, and then below him will be a cardinal, and below him will be a priest, and then you're at the bottom.
Correct, but
It doesn't say that.
There is hierarchy caked into Buddhism.
So what I understand about the hierarchy that's caked into Buddhism is similar to the hierarchy caked into the caste system in Hinduism, but I'll simplify it and say that without having a caste system, they do have a guru-student relationship, and the teacher, the guru, the one who reveals, who removes illusions, whenever they're in that position of power over you spiritually, of course they have material power over you as well. You know, you do whatever physically that they need. And maybe we're getting off topic a little bit, but I'm willing to talk about the fact that because guru is a special interest of mine as well.
Okay.
I know that an accusation from Indian audiences is that Westerners are misinterpreting an abuse from a guru to a student, but they're, you know, in the Eastern mind, a guru cannot abuse a student. The student belongs to the guru.
Sure,
and in the Western mind, and this is the modern take that I still very much follow, is that you can't consent to certain things. Like, you can't consent to being violently attacked. You can't consent to being killed, you know?
Yeah. So I mean, like, if we're getting into like just the whether or not like people are misinterpreting it, like, and like oftentimes you can get into these conversations about like whether or not, like, especially like a difference between Western, Eastern ethos is about whether or not that's a I don't necessarily, like, by the way you described it, I don't necessarily know that that's a misinterpretation. Rather
No, yeah,
than,
exactly. It's just a moral valuative.
That is completely
different.
Just like it's generative it's generative internally and has nothing to do with, like,
see, if the guru kicks you in the face, my Western mind is to say he's not a guru because he's kicking people in the face, and the Eastern mind would say he knows your incarnation and he knows what would happen to you if you didn't get kicked in the face. He's taking away suffering by causing it to you in this life, so you don't have to do the deal or the harder stuff in the next one. He knows better. But we have to it allows, and I guess this is the problem with religion in politics, is that we're assuming a meta system that cannot be evidentially proven, and we're going to use that as the basis for our values.
Sure. And well, I mean, and also the black box of, like, the human mind. Does the guru actually know, or is he just sort of built up this confidence through religious zeal that his own id that's driving him is something other than his id?
Interesting stuff. But we'll go back to the main topic here. We've discussed Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Let's get to the king of the political religions. That's an accusation that has been made, not by you or me, but it's definitely been made in the Islamophobic and also in the critical religion study. Okay, I think it's very fair to say that Muhammad was prescribing a way of living, which is what religions do, but he was prescribing it in a way that the government should be involved with.
He built a nation.
He literally built a nation.
He was
a warrior.
Like, he was a warrior. He built a nation. So there is, like, this is something that actually brings us back to, like, the concern of, like, the here and now. Even though, like, Islam can be very focused on the afterlife and about achieving the afterlife, but the
building of the caliphate is about making it the kingdom here.
Yes, exactly. And so it's still, even with an afterlife, still very much concerned with the here and now. And also on top of that, like, and this comes from me just being an econ boy, the fact that it's one of the few religions that adheres, even in the modern day, not always strictly, but can adhere pretty strictly to laws involving finance. they're one of the few religions, because like Christianity
Says
doesn't
that
allow
you're not supposed to.
that usury is wrong and that should not be allowed, but Christianity
But Christians don't give a
evolved
fuck about
far
that.
beyond that. So
we somehow reasoned our way out of it.
yeah, so like it's one of the few modern religions, especially of the Abrahamic religions, that is anti-usury, like as a mode.
And you think that it's more effectively doing that in the governments of the world than Christianity is.
Yeah, I think that finance is so intertwined with politics. I mean, the modern states can't form without more. I mean, like, double entry bookkeeping is literally the thing. When I was describing, like, what is it? Evolution happening in, like, flurries. One of the flurries of evolution for, like, Europe was double entry bookkeeping. That happened.
What does that mean?
Often. Double entry bookkeeping was an invention that allowed basically just for you to look at your assets and your liabilities rather than just sort of looking at like debt obligations and income as two completely separate things
Okay.
that don't, or that
It's like an economical evolution of mind.
yes,
Being
yeah,
able to
and
be aware of them as one thing.
and it allows for the understanding that debt can be leveraged into. It literally is intertwined with usury. It's the ability to recognize debt as assets at times.
And can you define usury for me? I think I know what it is, but
Usury is the charging of interest.
Yeah.
Okay. It is like that when you lend money to somebody.
It's loaning for profit.
Yes, exactly. And so,
Is there any amount of loaning with any interest at all that is not usury?
I don't think so.
That sounds correct. But I thought I'd ask because you might be able to say, oh well, when you loan somebody, obviously you got to do a 0.01% interest because inflation or whatever.
Or just it's not interest
really
like an
profitable.
accrual, but rather just like a set amount that you have to pay extra. But that's just interest.
A fee?
Yeah,
with extra
extra steps or less
All right.
steps
That's a good point.
because it doesn't compound.
Well, a minute ago we were discussing how Islam comes from a militant political entity. That's who he was. He was a nation builder. Let's talk about the relationship between religions as nation builders. Hinduism has many stories where the main character, where the god character, Vishnu or Ram, for example, is the king. And he's supposed to be this perfect king, father and warrior and friend, all of those things. But they're deeply entwined, the political role of God, you know. So I think you could say if there was a historical Ram, he was a very highly respected warrior king who conquered and united, or at least presided over a massive kingdom. And obviously there's a relationship with Islam there. I mean, that's what he did, right? We know historically we know that he existed and that he did put together at least some community.
Yeah, and I could be mistaken. He became king, but is this a story of an actual like formation of an actual kingdom, or is this a story of more of a
well, for example, Ram's story Ram is the king of Ayodhya. He was born to the king of Ayodhya, but he's an incarnation of God. So God said, I'm going to come down to earth and make some changes, and I'm going to be the four princes of this kingdom. And the first prince is the one that's the most him, and the second prince is the one is a little bit, he's still God, but he's less God.
The Xerox effect.
Yes, and each one becomes a little bit less, exactly. Yeah, so there's four brothers, and the first one is Ram, and he's the king. And the second one is the priest, and there's two other ones which are like the perfect servants. But you're right. The story isn't about the forming of Ayodhya. The story is about, though, the perfecting of it.
Fair enough.
For 10,000 years, he reigns in perfection.
Yeah, I mean, that's as much political as anything. Maintenance is still political.
Yeah. So I think that there's a relationship between the historical Muhammad and the theoretical, Ram probably didn't exist, but it's possible that there was one or multiple people who this is based off of.
Right.
And if he existed, did he exist for 10,000 years? I'm not willing to talk about that right now. Supernatural or not, but we know that Muhammad lived and did that. So there's a relationship. Let's talk about. Do you think that Judaism is a emperor nation?
Not really. No.
Okay. You have more to say?
No. I wasn't.
I believe that the original Judaism I believe that the original tribe of Israel, they were Canaanites, actually.
Sure.
That they were actually a hunter-gatherer agriculture society, and I don't have a strong enough understanding of my research, but they worshipped in a way that supported a storm deity, Yahweh. They needed rain so that they could have crops. There was some sort of shift. I don't know when, maybe during their Babylonian enslavement, whenever they were enslaved by the Babylonians, when they became a warlord religion.
Right.
And they actually brought in this other god and kind of blended him with Yahweh and went from being a storm god to being a war god. So I do think that actually the religion of Judaism is very much about tribal warfare.
Sure. And it's clearly also about change. It is also about adapting to the current political moment. Almost like a political party would, as in its platform changes based off of the current facts on the ground sort of thing.
My claim is that Israelites as a culture, as an identity, was created politically.
Sure.
People were mixed up Moabites and Judahites and Canaanites and all sorts of Canaanites. Those were all just different parts of Canaan, and they were built into this. I mean, I'm gonna say what some people don't want to hear or believe, but the Jews were never in Egypt, and so where did they come from, and how did they get into this promised land? Well, the thing is that they were already there.
Yeah.
That the Jew story is a way. It's a type of historiography where you compete with other histories and say, look, our history is better. So I want to be this identity because we're the ones that did this. So it's literally a political
campaign.
It's literally the nation building is what Judaism originally is. Well, I'm not saying that that's not what it became, because we talked a lot about the good of the earth afterwards.
And then the fracturing of that, and the sort of spread of Judaism through to other lands where they still remained. They weren't because you talk about the campaigning, but it lost a lot of that element because Judaism as it exists in places like Romania had a tendency to be a little bit more cloistered. A little bit.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, a little bit a little bit more keeping to themselves. One of the reasons why it was easy for
pogroms.
Hitler and pogroms to happen
for hundreds of years. It was happening. Yeah, these communities were easily isolated.
All of those people were witnessing a strain, a type of Judaism that existed in that at that time modern age, which was that they were, and this again is adapting to the politics on the ground, but because they, in Christian society, they weren't very welcome.
That's
with
true.
open arms, and to be perfectly honest, they were more welcome under some of the sultanates and some of the they were more welcome under the Ottoman Empire than they were in Europe at the same time, and so the Judaism that you see in those areas was a little bit less externally social.
When you say they're cloistered, what that brings to my mind again is just what I was saying, is that there's not. In Islam, there are Islams. There's not one actual Christianity and then all these fake ones. There are all these real Christianities.
No, absolutely.
So
and a lot
there
of
are different communities of Judaism, yeah.
And a lot of the Christianities that form that form in Europe, in like the crucible of Europe during like the 100 Years' War and all of like, and prior to that, like the like Martin Luther had political complaints with the church. He didn't have I mean, like, they were complaints about the strictures of the church, but they were complaints about the political aspects of the church. Because he thought that, like, essentially he rallied against things like the concept of baptizing babies, and that, like, or the transubstantiation of the Eucharist, or like any of these what do you call them, sacraments that the church had invented that weren't in Scripture. He had like a huge complaint that like a lot of these sacraments that were now practiced were actually not in Scripture, and they didn't have a basis in Scripture. And he also argued that the real reason that these sacraments existed is that it was a type of bureaucracy that allowed the church to interject themselves between people and their God, so that they could sort of leech off of people at every stage of them trying to interface with God.
It sounds like we would agree that Martin Luther had a political contention that Christianity had become too political.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Earlier, before we started recording, we were discussing just how we would discuss. Just now we said early Christianity may not have been, for those few hundred years, it seems like it wasn't political, it was immaterial. But the Church of the High Catholic Church during its heyday, right, we would say that is as political as a religion can get.
Absolutely.
Just like we would say about Islam. And can we just say one other thing is that there's not a moral evaluation about whether or not it's a good thing that a religion be political. It may be very well the case that religion should be political, because the one that's right would actually inform us how to do the government right, you know?
Yeah, and I don't think politics is a dirty word. Power exists whether you like it or not, or whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. So, like, thinking of power as a dirty word, which, like, politics is the regimentation and organization of power, right? So,
talking about power.
Yes. So if you have like a sort of if you're sort of icked out by power, then you're essentially relegating yourself to be the powerless, while other people might go and grab it. So you can even make the case that it's morally righteous to be interested in politics.
Yeah, and if, for example, there is a true religion, it should be political, because politics is how we make those power shifts and changes. And if there is a truth that we're supposed to be reflecting, right, I think that it makes sense that, if I really believed that I knew the right answer, then it would be in the best interest of everybody for them to know.
Yeah,
right?
It's sort of like that Louis C.K. bit. I know he got like canceled, but that Louis C.K. bit about the like, just him pointing out the fact that, like, if you really do believe that abortion is murder, then, like, you should be doing more than just, like, bitching about it on Twitter.
You got to blow up some clinics.
No,
that's what he says,
like,
right?
No, yeah, he was just like, I mean, like, if you actually believe that.
And that's what his point is, that you don't really believe. That's what his contention. I think he's putting his finger and saying, is that true?
But what you're talking about there is that if it really is the true religion, which is to say, if your faith is strong enough, then you should feel as though you should.
I hear you.
Should stretch everywhere.
But we are separating a little bit here. I don't want to split hairs, but you're discussing an individual case, and I'm saying in absolute objective, like, no, it turns out Confucianism is the one true path. You know what I mean? If there is a real God and there is a real way that it's supposed to be done, not just individually, how would you react if you really believed that? But I mean, it's like, that's the most important question to me. If that was real, that's the most important answer for us to know.
Yeah, but I think more what I was, like, talking about is, like, the follow through. Who enacts that exact argument that you're saying?
Perceive that.
Yeah. Like, that is what you're describing is inevitably a call to action for each individual, and the question is do you believe that the religion that you believe in is the true religion? And
Yeah.
that that decides whether or
It's the
not
faith
you
part.
feel the duty of the thing that you just described.
Yeah. Interesting conversation.
We talked about John Brown,
Yeah.
I would heavily recommend. One of the reasons why I said he was like probably one of the most Christian men to ever exist is because his entire existence, or like his entire like moral universe, centered around a revulsion and a desire to destroy and end slavery, and
that's a political end
Yes.
from a religious, background.
And the reason why I bring it up is because if you check out anybody listening, or you
Yeah.
also as well, if you're into some maybe not so light reading, but like it's a book by one of his sons called Cloud. It's not a book by his son. It's writings compiled by somebody else of his son talking about his dad, and it's called Cloud Splitter, and he describes how living in the different places that his family lived, that his dad never turned his nose up at other people. I mean, like in the book, it literally even describes, he's like, my dad knew what went on between men and women, and men and men, and men and animals, in fact, and none of it drove him to look down on or spit upon anybody. He just merely elected to operate a different way. And he describes like all of these other things, all these other goings-ons that like his dad would view as licentious or sinful, but not judgmental or think that it was his duty to intervene with that. But it goes on this long street about that, and then at the end of it, the only thing that got his muster up was slavery. So like his Christianity was moral, but there was such a political element to it, because it like none of these like social issues got his goat.
But you can agree that those social issues could certainly be political. He could be
absolutely.
up in arms against the rampant bestiality and homosexuality in his world.
Yeah.
Apparently, that wasn't his main focus.
I mean, obviously, what I'm kind of describing is just like is like a liberal subject as well, because like I'm describing someone who views like has a sort of live and let live philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
The like, oh, what gets on between men and women is not really much of my business. I don't particularly care for it, but I'm not going to.
But this very public thing of enslavement, it cannot stand.
Yes,
and this is not a Christian way to live.
Absolutely, and so much so that he decided to throw away his life for it, which, some scholars would say is like the inciting incident of the Civil War.
That is true, that I recall reading in my 8th grade, American history, that this was a prominent sign of the Civil War, if not the cause, if not a, spark. Yeah.
Yeah, like roughly 2 years after he was hung.
Yeah. Hanged. I remember learning that back then, too, is that your socks are hung off the banister, but humans are hanged in execution. Now we've all learned a little bit about that grammar.
Yeah.
We've looked at the 5 major religions, and I hope that it hasn't been too clickbaity to leave the question unanswered. I don't think that there is an easy answer to the question of, are certain religions more or less political? And I think perhaps where I'm sitting right now, and it's subject to change, is that individuals are religious, individuals are political, and they often go hand in hand. Sure. Some are very much both. I don't know for sure that any religion is more or less political.
I think that we've satisfactorily talked that through to where I think you may be right about that.
Yeah. Well, I will say something else, which is that in without naming any names, I think that our professor would be of the view, and I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I think I'm comfortable with saying he's of the view that some religions, because he seemed to hint at this the other day when we were discussing this with him, that some religions are actually just political systems.
I think so. I would say that if I like coming into this, we came up with the heuristic here in this discussion that concerning yourself with the here and now as opposed to like the afterlife is like the way to divine like what religions are more or less political, and we're sort of backing away from that. But like I came into this sort of thinking that like one of the best ways to know whether or not like a religion is like particularly political is how recent was it formed. Because I think that like as you get stronger and stronger, more encompassing and more powerful states and governments, their realities bleed into the social fabric, and that's the crucible from where these religions like
Would
formed.
you say that the more recent they are, the more political they are?
Not necessarily as like a direct rule, but I would say. But I would say that like your percentage chance that you're going to come up with like an inherently more political religion than other religions that have existed prior is like getting higher and higher.
And we're getting there. We're about to wrap up, but
okay.
I think another thing I'll say is that when we've mentioned, yes, there are Christianities and Islams, and it's extremely diverse. There's maybe as many religions as there are people, because could you ever really say any two Christians are following the same exact Christianity? Perhaps, but people like me who could split hairs would be able to find where they are differing. And so when it comes to that, well, you can't really answer the question, are certain religions more political or less, whenever there are so many versions of every religion.
Sure. Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that. I come from I mostly know about like sects of Christianity, and
even in that, we would agree that modern day Christians are some extremely political, and some like the SDAs and the Seventh-day Adventists and the Jehovah's Witnesses are a sect of Christianity which believe in not voting, for example, and not having political opinions.
Protestants used to be
Christians
similar.
on both sides. Who?
Protestants used to be of a similar bent before, like the moral majority and your like Barry Goldwater campaigns and stuff like that. Sorry, I shouldn't have opened that up.
No,
because,
go ahead. I do remember
that's
hearing about the moral majority. Maybe I'll discuss that on another day.
Absolutely, that's definitely a table it for now.
Well, I think we had a great time today. I really appreciated talking to you, Thor.
Yeah, I had a good time. I thought I was going to be a little bit more contentious, or I was going to be a little bit, well, not contentious. You're an easy person to talk to. It's just more like I thought I was going to be a little bit harder about my like viewpoint. But
it turns out we're all very flexible people, and we don't even know what we believe. That's what I think. I think that we're all bullshitting it a little bit more than we sometimes want to admit.
More than a little bit, man.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to say, I'm winging it. And I'm figuring it out as I go along.
Perpetually winging it.
That's okay. I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to end the conversation there. Again, thank you so much for being here today, Thor.
Happy to be here.
I hope I'll have you on again. And I'm sure that later on, maybe in this coming weeks or months, we'll see you again for another conversation with this riveting economist.
Sure. Sounds fun.
Thank you again for tuning in to Impolite Company. This was our very first episode. I hope that I have great information and conversations for you in the future to listen to. Thank you.